How's it going, Knicks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Fireside Knicks with your hosts Dylan and Davin. And today we are going to talk about probably the biggest player to discuss this offseason, Julius Randle. Now, Randle, three-time All-Star, two-time All-NBA player. But for some reason, it seems like this year is a make-or-break year for him. It's a brand new team around him. There's a big contract extension stuff going around him. So there's a lot of storylines to discuss with Randle. We're just going to jump right into it, though. Davin, tell me how you're doing first off. And secondly, what are your expectations for Julius Randle this upcoming season?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Thank you for asking. And to be honest with you, this is, I would say, make or to break it. I'm an advocate for Julius Randle. I want him to be great. I want him to do good. That's all, all the works. At the same time, I do understand how this business works. You know what I mean? So it's like on the business side of things, if things don't, go as well, if he's not adjusting to his role as he should, the conversation will pick up around, I believe, the trade deadline, not even the off season, because he has an extension that could be expected, what we've been expecting now. But here we are almost, a month away from the season, and nothing has come of that. We saw the other day Randall and the Knicks family were in the Bronx for the Earl Monroe new Renaissance school opening. Like it's like he's gaining XP, with the Knicks fans and everything. He's gaining a PR, But at the same time, I don't know if this is too little, too late. Because I mean, I saw a lot of faces at that grand opening, but there are faces I didn't see at that grand opening, and that's not stirring the pot or anything. It's more like as a teammate or teammates, you would expect someone to have shown their face at the Earl Monroe grand opening, but I don't. I'm not one to stir the pot at all, man. But that's very interesting. Julius Randle really, he's a 25-10 guy. How do you let that go? You know what I mean? But at the same time, we could see it happen, man. We could see it happen. We just got to get real. We got to be real with ourselves.
And now you say that you can see it happening. When you say that, there's been things about possibly trading him and stuff. Those kinds of rumors have gone around for a while, right? So
Yeah.
one thing I want to point out, of course, there's been a lot of talk about getting a center, such as like Walker Kessler, DeAndre Ayton has been a name now that has come about. Do you think that if the Knicks were to trade Randall for a center, that would be a good idea? Because right now, Mitchell Robinson is out for probably the first 2 to 3 months, which is going to be problematic in its own regard, right? So Randall might become the starting center on opening night, which, I addressed my concerns about that in our previous video. So, well, my question to you is really, do you think the Knicks should trade Randall for a center, or do you think that they should hold on to Randall and try to go for a more low-key center name, like a Nick Richards or something?
That's a great question, man. I'll be honest. I think we got to tough it out. We have to tough it out with Randall. Now, Tibbs had a quote saying he wants to play Randall at the 5, 10 to 15 minutes a game. Now, seeing this Mitch Robinson, that was before the Mitch Robinson news even dropped. He said that. Okay, that was before that even dropped. So after it dropped, we're like, all right, is this something he's committing to? Are we going to expect to see Julius Randle at the 5, 25-minute stretches? I would hope not. I would hope not. So if they could get somebody, low key, a Walker Kessler, that conversation was really big through the end of the season there, going into the offseason. I was really expecting something like that to make weight. We got Mikal Bridges. That's phenomenal. More scoring. We can never get enough of that. And defense. At the same time, size matters. Size matters. When you have guys that have full lineups of 6'8" guys, Orlando Magic, the one that comes to mind off the dome. I mean, but besides Cole Anthony, that team is ridiculous with as far as height and length they have at the 4 and the 5. So it's like I really look forward to what move they could make, but it has to be something low key. I think Julius Randle will be just fine this season playing that role, but that's also me assuming that Tibbs is going to be, hey, yeah, 15 minutes, you're good at the 5, and we can rotation that. And I mean, Precious Achua, that's my guy. I really hope he really takes a step this year. He kind of built himself this offseason, but the offseason played a very tricky game. That goes with contract talks and everything. But Precious Achua, he can get the job done. He was a double-double guy for, I think, the month of February there, from January into January through February. He was a double-double guy. He had games putting up almost 20 rebounds in games, and he was playing 45 minutes, 43 minutes, 40 minutes. This is happening consecutive games. So he has the capability. Him, Randall, you have Jericho Sims to a lesser extent, but I think that can make it work until Mitchell gets back. I'm sure that's around Christmas time or so.
Right, and something I want to point out, you say that Achua can get the job done, and I firmly believe he can, be serviceable in some regards, but my biggest concern is the lack of size, right? With Mitchell Robinson out, we don't have a 7-footer really on the roster at the moment, which is why I was concerned about Randall having to play the 5, especially too because he's coming off of a shoulder injury, right? And a big part of his game and how he creates offense is using his shoulder. Now he's going to have to not only do that, of course, but now he's going to have to do that against, 7-footers and guys that are much bigger than him. And while he has experience playing center, is that really the ideal situation for him coming off an injury? I don't think so personally, right?
Yeah.
And back to my point about Achua, the lack of size worries me a lot. I think Achua would be good as a backup four, but I really don't know if I feel good about him being the backup center. I know had some good moments last season, and you mentioned double double guy. Yeah, of course, and he stepped up his game a lot last season. I respect that a lot. I think he earned his way into another contract with the Knicks, but I personally want them to go get a center, and I wanted them to from the start as soon as Hartenstein left. When Hartenstein left, I said that they need to go get a center even before the news about Robinson came out that he was going to miss some time. There was obviously injury concerns about Robinson regardless, but now that he's officially out, the need for a center, in my opinion, is much more significant. Much more.
Yeah.
And while Randall can fulfill that playing at the five, because he's a bigger guy. He's 6'8", 6'9". He's a good rebounder, of course, a high level scorer. It'll enhance the floor spacing. That's a plus to it. But the defense, of course. I know we have OG Anunoby out there that can guard the bigger guys, and that can lessen some concerns around the defense. But when you're facing guys with a really tall lineup of teams that have guys that are 6'10" and 7 foot both in the same starting five. That worries me a lot about it because I don't know if you can necessarily go the whole season with, an under 7 foot lineup entirely. Like, I understand not every team has a 7 footer, but, we don't even really have a guy that's above 6'9", which is a concern to me. And it worries me, but I think if what Randall does this season, right, if Randall ends up being the starting center and he plays really well, I think that's going to really impact his contract negotiations. We all know he's eligible for a 4-year, $181 million extension. Of course, that's like the maximum. He doesn't have to sign that specifically, but he is an all-NBA player. I would assume that would be the type of contract he would get, right? So I think really this season's going to be so dependent on his future, not just with the Knicks, but in his career in general, in the NBA. Randall is a veteran who's been in the league for quite some time, and this is a guy who, had a track record before he came to the Knicks, had a track record of, being a solid player, but probably nothing more than just a very good role player. Then all of a sudden he comes to the Knicks, becomes this all-star, all NBA level talent, and he's continued that for the past couple seasons, which is fantastic. But now it's a bit of different circumstances given the new roster. You added Mikal Bridges, you have OG Anunoby back, you're kind of building this team around, the Villanova connection and all that stuff. Randall's kind of being viewed as like one of the odd guys out, which to me is a little weird because I think Randall deserves a lot more respect. I've been a guy that's vouched for Randall to get respect for ages now, and I think Randall is a fantastic player. But I think this season's going to tell a lot. I think it's going to really tell a lot about where he fits on this roster, how his future is going to pan out the rest of the way, and just really how much more money he's going to make with a contract. A bunch of different factors are going to go into this. And usually you don't see guys that are perennial all-stars enter this so-called make-or-break season that I, mentioned in the opening. Usually use the term make-or-break season to describe guys that have been struggling and guys that need to prove it. Julius Randle, oddly enough, still has to prove a lot this season somehow, and that's because of just circumstances around him. A lot of it is out of his control. He obviously didn't control getting injured. It's not his fault. It was a freak accident. But now it's in a different situation where we have guys like Bridges on the roster. The center situation is bleak. I really am curious what's going to happen. I think Randall could have a great season. But at the same time, if he doesn't perform to expectations, I feel like that could affect, the trade rumors and stuff around him. I really do. And, maybe they'll decide
I
that...
really couldn't have said it better.
Go ahead.
Pardon me. I couldn't have said it better. What you were saying, it was all the way back in June. Richard Jefferson, little tea leaves were being put out about Randall, and people. I don't know what his personal attitude is. I don't know. I've never met Julius Randall, but outside of what we see on television and in interviews, it seems that there's a sense of, well, like for Richard Jefferson himself to come out and say you're gonna have to make a sacrifice and you're going to have to be okay with doing that. You're gonna have to and he's not the only one that said that. Same thing, like I said when I said earlier, Windhorst is saying he's extremely tradable right now. Well, I mean, for Brian Windhorst to say that, much respect to the esteemed colleague that he can be. Like, this guy he knows what he's talking about. And I'm like, okay, if Wendy's saying this, if Richard Jefferson is saying this, if Julius Randle has an attitude problem or anything like that, or a defensive problem that tends to be, you know what I mean? Because when he gets mad, the guy's all of a sudden he's not playing defense. So it's like, different conversations will be had. And that's something that kind of sticks out to me about Randle. That's why it's such a huge question mark. Like, why are we even having this discussion? This guy's 30 years old, going on 30 years old now. Like you said, make or break year for this guy. Let's be serious. You're a two-time All NBA, but circumstances over the last few years have not been in your favor. You got here in 2019, we were giving you the key to the city, right? And all of a sudden, things didn't go pretty sour pretty quickly there. about a year in, 2 years in, we're seeing Charlotte in trade negotiations, trade talks, and everything like that. And it's like, man, this is a roller coaster. And me joining on to this last year, seeing how things evolved, I'm like, I like Julius Randle. He's a strong going guy, and I got to see with my own eyes. It's apparent, God, this is the year for him. And if he's the
Right,
same way he was,
and there is one thing I want to point out because you mentioned the
yeah,
Windhorst thing about him saying that he's extremely tradable. There's two ways I feel about that, right? I don't want to trade Julius Randle. I don't. I think he's a fantastic player. I
yeah,
think he fits with the team. I think he's, a guy you can win with as a second option. Maybe not as a first option, but as a second option, I do think you can win with him, right? But at the same time, there is a point to it. There is some logic behind the extremely tradable thing. Like maybe there are certain things you could get in return that are better than what's being proposed. Because I've seen some pretty ridiculous proposals for a Randall trade. So I
yeah,
think you can get like an all-star level player in return for him, and I think that's the only logical way to do it, in my opinion. But of course, I'm not the ones running the Knicks or anything like that. But my point is, there's some logic behind it, and like I said, if this season, let's say this season he struggles, right? He can't
yeah,
adapt to playing at center. He doesn't fit well with the guys around him for whatever reason. I firmly believe that's not going to happen, but of course we can't predict that. Anything could happen. There's a lot of things that go on in an NBA season. So let's say he struggles, right? And the Knicks decide, well, maybe this isn't the guy we need to build around for the future. Perhaps they start looking to trade for him. Perhaps they do. And maybe it could be something as stunning as when they traded Barrett and quickly mid-season for Anunoby. Perhaps it's something in the off-season where they, look for a guy like a much bigger name to really kind of replace Randall but keep this team competitive. Because I want to address this part too real quick. There's this narrative that's been going around that the Knicks were better off last season without Randall. Now I'm here to debunk that. It's not true. They were not better off. Yes, they won games still. They still made the second round. One could argue they probably still could have made the conference finals even if just Anunoby stayed healthy, right? But the numbers do not lie. The Knicks had a better winning percentage with Randall. They had better playmaking numbers with Randall. They had better scoring numbers with Randall. Everything, maybe the only thing that was worse was defense, right? But every other important aspect was way better with Randall, such as, like I said, scoring, playmaking, rebounding even. All this stuff was way better when Randall was there. And if you look at that, 2 to 3 week stretch following the Anunoby trade, when Randall was still healthy, that team looked unstoppable, right? That they looked unstoppable,
yeah,
which is why I have been someone that has been saying not to trade Randall right now, because I think you
yeah,
need to give it a chance to see what that roster at full strength looks like for a full season, because you only got I think 12 games out of it, and while those 12 games were phenomenal, it's not a large enough sample size. You want to see it pave the way for several months and into the postseason and all this stuff. And now that I mentioned the postseason, this reminds me of another thing too. How Randall performs in the postseason could determine a lot as well. We know that he's had some years of not really good playoff series. The 2 times he's been in the playoffs with the Knicks have been quite of a struggle. I think context matters in some of these circumstances. 2021 he didn't have that good of a supporting cast around him, and in 2023 he was playing on an injured ankle that required surgery, right? But at the end of the day, you still got to perform in the playoffs. And if Randall goes into this playoffs and puts up another dud in the playoffs, that's going to affect a lot of conversations. Now, if he comes into the playoffs and has an amazing postseason, plays like how, say, Josh Hart did last postseason, or plays as the second guy to Brunson and actually puts up, some very good numbers in the playoffs, then maybe the Knicks will be enticed to keep him around and decide he is the guy. But there's so many different factors that go into it, and I think Julius Randle is going to be the team's biggest X factor this season, which is, it sounds crazy to call an all-star an X factor, but it's true. With how deep the
it's true.
team is,
Yeah,
this team is, you have Bridges now as your third option, a guy who's been capable of putting up 20 a game, Anunoby capable of putting up 15 a game, Josh Hart and DiVincenzo, of course, capable of putting up double figures off the bench. But Randle, out of all these guys, is an X factor because his role is going to be impacted the most out of all these guys. DiVincenzo and Hart have played bench roles before in their careers, so it shouldn't take long for them to readapt to it, right? Mikal Bridges, of course, just inserts himself back into the starting 5 with the Knicks. He's played with Brunson before, so the chemistry will be there. Randle, on the other hand, We're questioning how he'll fit. We're wondering what his play style will be. He might have to play center now, which is something that wasn't anticipated at the start of the year. There's a lot of things that, a lot of different circumstances Randall is facing right now that could define his career. It really could. So I'm interested to see what happens with that.
Yes, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. X Factor was I couldn't have said it better myself. Honestly, the X Factor is actually what I have in my notes here. We know the cons. We know the cons. It is what it is. But as far as the lineup outside of Randall, there's a play style there, and Randall coming in almost like he's going to come in and just shake the whole entire thing up. How do you game plan against that? And that's something like these guys are going to look unstoppable when everyone's on the floor looking healthy. We have a center, a formidable center, and he's not playing the five so much substantially, but when everything's all gelled together, these guys are going to be a machine, like a well-oiled machine. And Julius Randle's going to come in, and you're going to have to pick your poison between who's going to destroy you tonight. Because we have Jalen Brunson that can give you 40, we got Mikal Bridges that can give you 40, and we have Julius Randle give you 35 and 15. This is going to happen. So it's like there's going to be nights where teams will have to literally pick a poison, and who's ever off based off of statistics, past games, that's how they're going to have to do it. But just going into the game like, oh, this is going to be a cakewalk, just no chance. No chance. Not with Julius Randle in that lineup. I don't care who's at the five or not, to be honest with you. The guy is going to get his. And like you said, the shoulder injury is something to think about. I will say that. And that's something that actually kind of like a light bulb in my mind when you said that. I'm like, wow, that is true. Julius Randle he's an imposing player. He's going to be very physical, very tenacious. So if he has an injured elbow, maybe that's not the best. Maybe 10 minutes, 15 is what we should be doing, maximizing him there. Because now we know Mitchell Robinson's not back. There's no reason he should be touching 25 minutes per game.
And
so,
I
that's
want
actually
to touch on that real quick. The concern I have, and this is just where I have, yes, they wanted to play Randall 10 to 15 minutes at the 5 before the Mitch news came out. Maybe Thibodeau knew about it beforehand, and that's why he said it, but we can't just assume that, right? We can't. My concern is, though, if you're only going to play him that long at the 5 position, right, that means you're relying on Achua and Sims to basically be your starting centers. And I am very worried about that because Jericho Sims, he's had times where he's come in to fill in for Mitch in the past, but it hasn't gone that great. It hasn't gone great. And Achua is an undersized big. He's proven to be a steady force, but he's undersized, he has flaws, and the spacing with Achua on the floor especially will be horrendous. And that's what I'm worried about. So me personally, I think you might not have a choice now but to have Randall kind of adapt to playing the 5 a pretty healthy load. Because on opening night, he might be in the starting lineup as the center. He might be the biggest guy in the starting 5. Chances are that one of DiVincenzo or Josh Hart comes back into the starting 5 and Randall is center. Now, I don't know if you feel differently about that, but I personally think that they might need to have Randall play a little bit more minutes at the 5, given just how bleak the situation is there. Now, if they make a trade for a center, it's a different conversation we can have. But right now, we have to talk about the guys that are on the roster. And right now, Julius Randle is probably the team's starting center. So you might need to play him. You might, instead of playing him for 10 to 15 minutes there, you might need to play him for 25, 30 minutes there. You can give him some minutes where maybe he's sharing the floor with Achua or Sims, but you're going to have to probably play him a lot more minutes, which is a worry in that regard, but also just the center room is bleak. I don't know if you feel differently about that, but I want to hear your thoughts on that before we wrap it up.
Yeah, I honestly, like you said, the 25 minutes or so, man, I'll be honest, that's something to think about. I can't see myself like Julius Randle starting center. All right, he's the best center we have. Let's be real. He's the best center we have right now. If we're being real, that is what it is. But the fourth line, putting him at the 5, man, and asking him to do that and play defense, I've yet to see him do something like that.
It's a big ask.
You know what I mean? Substantially, I've yet to see him do something like that. So I'm not even going to get my hopes up for that. I'm not going to put the expectation for him to be a starting center level player. He can do it. Is it going to, promote winning? I do not know about that. That's what the whole comes down to.
If he performs well at the 5, though, like I've been saying, it's going to impact a lot of his offseason negotiations. He might get a pretty big contract.
He's giving you 20 and 10, at the 5. How do you not sign that guy back? So Julius Randle, like you said, he said he's willing to take any role he has to do. I don't believe that necessarily meant people took it as he's coming off the bench, but maybe that did mean him playing at the 5. You know what I mean? So it's like that would be phenomenal.
Right. We know Julius Randle is a guy who's usually bought into the product, and he has been for a while.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
If he buys into playing a different role and different position, that could tell a lot going forward. It really can.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely can tell
a lot. That definitely makes me think a lot about that. Like you said, and yeah, starting the season with him at the 5 is the best go. It really is. Me saying Chris Achua is starting is just based off, just personnel and knowing that these guys can fit in their roles and 15 minutes adjusted here, 15 minutes. That's fine.
Right,
It
and
doesn't mean whoever
that
starts
it's
doesn't
had
finish
its
the
good
game. So
times in the past. I worry about that being something sustainable for several months. I feel like that's
yeah,
something that
and I still like we have months until Mitch Robinson's back. But whoever starts the game doesn't necessarily finish the game. So if they did even start, Precious Chua at the
that's a
five,
good point.
Julius Randle's the closing five, things like that, Nate, something like that could kind of come in with time. But yeah, that's really how I see it, man. You make me think about that. Though. Like if he's the starting center going in, playing 30 minutes a game, this guy, how do you not resign Julius Randle? How do you not?
Right.
It gets so
And,
interesting for
and
him, and the fact he's not re-signed right now is actually pretty interesting to me. But we're not gonna. I guess they want to see what they can get. Like you said, it's a prove it season, which is crazy. But this is where we're at
it's
with it now. This
crazy
is where
that
we're
we're
at.
at that point with an all-star that it's a prove it season, but it kind
Yeah.
of is that case. But guys, we really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a little longer, but I think this is a very important topic to talk about coming into the season because it's a big season for Julius Randle. It could arguably be the biggest season of his career when you really look at all the circumstances that we highlighted. So if there's anything else you want to add to it, say it in the comments section below. But until then, guys, we'll see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Knicks. Peace out.